I've been and who I am, all the ways I've grown.
This isn't self-help, it's a full-on rebirth. Welcome to Girl Wake Up, the podcast for women who are done playing small, staying silent, or living by rules they never wrote. I'm Amy Polacco, journalist, divorce and life coach, and freedom warrior, and I'm here to help you take your power back. Because the system isn't going to save us. We need to save ourselves. So grab your coffee, your courage, and maybe a few curse words. It's time to wake up. Welcome to Girl Wake Up, everyone. You know that exposing the underworld of our family court system is something near and dear to my heart. Not only have I lived through some of it, I've written about it extensively, and I see it every single day when I'm helping divorce coaching clients. So that's why I'm so thrilled to have Meg Groff on our podcast today. Welcome, Meg.
So happy to be here.
She's joining us from beautiful Bucks County, Pennsylvania. I was just saying to her when I was a TV reporter many moons ago in my younger years in Philadelphia, I became acquainted with that beautiful area you are in. I want to tell all of you about Meg. She is a family law attorney who has represented and advocated for victims of domestic abuse and their children for more than 4 decades. You should see her resume. I mean, truly, she has lived a life of service. Since retiring from active trial work in 2020, she concentrates on providing pro bono guidance to unrepresented protective parents in contested custody cases and counseling young lawyers. We definitely need that. We need them to be aware of domestic abuse, which we'll talk about. She helped draft Pennsylvania's Cadence Law amendments and advocates for its passage nationwide. And her award-winning memoir, Not If I Can Help It, A Family Lawyer's Battles for Justice for Victims of Domestic Violence and the Poor, was published by Rivertown Books in 2025. And it's available wherever books are sold. Thank you so much, Meg. I have so many things I want to ask you, but first of all, what first opened your eyes to what goes on in our family court system? I know for me, when I first experienced it, I thought this is like the Twilight Zone. What did you think?
Well, I first became aware of the situation with domestic violence and how bad the law was when I was a hippie with my husband and young child and gradually going to college, like one course at a time. And a young woman came pounding on our door late at night one night. And we lived in a very isolated area. And she was fleeing from her ex-boyfriend who had beaten her severely and had grabbed the nursing baby and fled. Oh. And she was just running to the nearest house, which was quite some distance, our house, because it was really in an isolated area. And she told me that when she called the police to say that he was smashing in the door with a hatchet, and she was actually hiding in somebody else's house, but the people weren't there.
Right.
When they found out, initially they were saying, we'll be right there, we'll come. But when they found out that it was her ex-boyfriend, when they found out it was domestic, they said they don't get involved. Now in Pennsylvania, now you do have to get involved, but that's a nebulous concept about getting involved. And I couldn't believe it. I thought maybe, she just had been too upset and not really understood what was happening. So I called the police and I got basically the same result. Mm-hmm. Then in the morning, she stayed over. It was such a horrendous situation. And one of the things I called the lawyer, one of the things they kept saying was, well, his baby too. And it's her word against his. And, she'll need to get a lawyer to do custody, but it costs a lot of money. And I just thought this is
insane,
so horrendous. Right. That I have to do something, whatever I can do. I have to do something about it. So I just decided to be a lawyer.
Wow.
And I went to law school, and that was my goal, to try to change things. So I not only wanted to represent victims, but also to try and change the system as much as I could, which I spent a great deal of time doing in Bucks County. I think I made a great difference there, and some in Pennsylvania, but there's so much work to do. Now I'm working in that Cadence Law, trying to change that nationwide.
What would you say to people who might be listening who have no idea what family court is like?
Well, they're lucky that they don't know it. And if they can stay out of it, they just can, they're blessed because it's really almost too it's almost too horrible to
To
have to be
explain. Right.
believable.
Right.
Yeah. It's actually gotten worse than when I was practicing in the early years.
In what
Because,
way?
well, back then there was still the idea that women should be home with the children and men should be out doing important things. And therefore, you had an advantage in custody because it was like women's work,
Right.
So we didn't have a lot, and a lot of the men felt that way too. So they weren't able to they didn't go as quickly to custody as a way of perpetuating their abuse. They would do it by other things, more by financial or just, they would still use custody, but they really didn't, it wasn't as bad as it is now. But the same myths about, the same misogyny, the same general sense of like not looking at children as autonomous beings, that's always been there and that continues to be there. And it just has to be fought all the time. In my book, I try to give some tips to lawyers about how to challenge that in court, how to deal with that in court, because it's really a question of trying to educate judges, which is no easy task. I mean, in Pennsylvania, we passed Cadence law, but we weren't able to get the provision that includes training judges, because our Constitution in Pennsylvania says that the judiciary and the legislation don't have rules over each other. So couldn't have a law that said they had to do something. So, it's very hard to get them trained.
Will you explain to everyone what is Cadence law?
Cadence law is basically based on the idea that custody decisions should be based on the safety of the child, that it should give priority to the safety of the child. And so there's a number of different parts of it that sort of go towards doing that. But the first one is that priority has to be to the safety of the child. So in custody law, across the country, every state has their own law, but they have some things in common. One of the things is that almost every state has factors that to sort of give the judge some kind of guidance in their incredible discretion. One of those factors, at least one of those factors, is always how well the parents get along with each other, and how, that they should communicate. And if you're the one who's not looking like you're being cooperative, which is always the victim, because the abuser wants to, he wants to communicate all the time. He wants to constantly be involved in deciding what to do and talking about and causing problems. And if she's not doing that, it's like, oh, she's the one that's not willing to cooperate. So it goes against the victim, this idea that you have to always be doing this. And the other thing is sort of a general sense that it's in the best interest of children always to have ongoing, consistent contact with both parents. And there's a big movement now, a counter movement of making 50-50 be the norm, that you start with that, because, children should be with both parents. And what I always say is it's true that if you have two loving parents who care about,
and healthy.
Yes, healthy and loving, who care about their children, who that's their priority, then yes, it is good for children to have ongoing, consistent contact with both of them.
Right.
But the word parent is not an entity that has some kind of separate distinction other than you're a person. And to me, it's like, what kind of a person are you? Before we say parent, who should have as much contact as possible, what if that parent is a pedophile? Do we still think that they should have ongoing, consistent contact? No, because they're a pedophile. So if
and we both know we both know of cases, right, Meg, where some of these abusive parents, and sometimes it is sexual abuse, have gotten custody of the children.
Absolutely. Whenever a client would say that there was sexual abuse, I was very nervous. That made me really concerned about the outcome of the case, because judges cannot stand the idea that a parent would do that. And so they immediately think that the woman is lying. And they also think that it requires that the person be a pedophile under this definition of pedophilia in order to do that. And that is not true. Sexual abuse is an easy way to abuse. It doesn't show. It's tremendously damaging, and it's a secret. It can be done and destroy a child, and nobody know about it and think like that person would never. Why would that person do that? He's never been interested in children. It's not an interest in children in most cases. It's an interest in abusing and controlling, and it's just one form. And that's something that judges have to be educated about. They have to understand, no, we're not saying necessarily he's a pedophile. What we're saying is he's an abuser, and this is one of the tremendously damaging ways that he is effectuating his abuse.
Exactly. And for everyone listening, Caden's law it was passed on a national level. It has to be passed in every state, right? And Danielle Pollack, I know you're working with at the National Family Violence Law Center. I've written many articles with her, is working diligently to get this passed. It's named for Caden Mancuso, who was 7 years old, who was killed by her abusive father, even though her mother, Kathy Sherlock, had begged the court, right, to not give him visitation. And it's such a heart-wrenching story.
And it's a Bucks County case.
Yes, exactly.
There was a study done concerning just the safety of children in the care of, in custody cases. And it was at some judicial organization, I just can't remember the name at the moment, that found that they did a 15-year study that ended in 2023. And it was close to 1,000 children who had been murdered in the midst of a separation custody situation, being placed in the unsupervised care of a murderous parent, of an abuser parent. So the numbers are extremely high. And of course, the damage other than murder is very
unmeasurable, right? And the most heartbreaking part, because I know I've written about some of these cases too, and we put it in our book, is that the signs were there. All of the signs were there, or so many of them were there, like flashing neon lights. And the other parent, whether it's a mom or a dad, are begging and pleading for help. And that's the hardest part for me to wrap my head around.
I know some of the cases that I've just come in contact with since I retired from court, of people, contacting me to say, give some advice. The scenarios have almost been, to me, just unbelievable that we could have this. And it struck me that I think part of the thing is that you need to be, the victim can't be enraged. Women can never be enraged in court. They have to always fit the description of what judges think an abused person should look like. They always have to be meek. They always have to be mild. It's very annoying, but you can't break every myth at once. But the thing is that if you have a lawyer, the lawyer should not be meek. The lawyer should be enraged. The lawyer should be beside themselves, and they should make it clear that this is unconscionable, because a lot of times people sort of go with, well, it seems to be that everybody's accepting this, this is being said, and that person said it, he's an expert or whatever. You have to come in strong with, this is, look what's happening here. You have to really be indignant. And the other thing is, you have to always, in terms of lawyers, if you're giving advice to lawyers or would-be lawyers, you have to be on one side all the time. You can't come in one day arguing one thing and the next day arguing another. I think that's why lawyers in general have such bad reputations, because they don't have any, seen as having no principles. But if you have to think about how the judge looks at things, and try to calculate how to educate them in that case, and in all cases, in any kind of possible way you can do, through your petition, through your argument, through your opening statement, your closing argument. Everything that you do has to be trying to also not only talk about the case, but educate them. Because I think the thing to know is that these are stories. These are true stories of real people. And it has to be taken out of this realm of, these are parents, and this is just like, we know where to put it, because they're parents, and children should have ongoing, consistent contact with both of them. It has to be made more vividly clear that these are cases, horrendous cases, and that justice has to be done.
Right. I think that's an excellent point about judges, because some of them are, plucked from somewhere else. They have no experience in family court. They have no education in domestic abuse, right? That's one thing. And secondly, we wish we could clone you, right, Meg? Because there are not that many attorneys, sadly, I don't like to say that, but that are willing to really go to bat for a domestic abuse victim. It breaks my heart when I have a divorce coaching client who's saying to me that their attorney's saying, we're not going to bring that up. No, don't mention abuse. Don't, we're not going to talk about that. Do they think their client won't be believed because the system is what it is? Do they not want to get into that messy thing? Some of my clients here in Connecticut, where we have Jennifer's Law, have been told, oh, if we bring up Jennifer's Law, that's going to tick the judge off. All these reasons.
Yeah. I mean, I did spend a lot of time in my career trying to educate lawyers. I did a lot of training of lawyers because, they are on the front line and they need to. I set up a whole training program for them. In Bucks County, I had set up this thing so that all victims of domestic violence could get free representation in protection from abuse cases. After a while, the court thought it was unfair, so they gave it free to either side because they thought we were being unfair by just giving it to the victims. But anyway, in that process, I also did trainings for lawyers representing. Because they really do need training. I think a lot of lawyers, like other people, don't understand the dynamics of domestic violence. They're often pulled, often misogynistic and everything else themselves. And I know it can be difficult if you have a one-judge courtroom. I was counseling a woman and her lawyer from a small county in the center of Pennsylvania, and I went to see the hearing, and it was just one judge, and I could see that the lawyer was afraid of him and afraid to alienate him because he was the only judge, and so she kept, when I'd say, you need to do this, you need to do that, she was like, well, I don't want to irritate the judge, but to me, lawyers are very afraid of judges, but I took another stand. My thing was that I wanted the judges to be afraid of me. And it's possible to do that. You can do that. And the way you can do that is, one, all the case law, everything. So they know that you know more than they do. They know that. Right. That's one. You make it clear. Secondly, of course, you're enraged, so they're dealing with an angry person. Then if you don't win, you appeal. If there's, if you had a just case, which you would have, or you wouldn't be there, because I wouldn't represent a bogus case, not that there's very many of them, but I wouldn't do it. And I would never represent an abuser, no matter how much they were trying to pay me. But you appeal. And I think that the thing about that is appeals can be very expensive, and you have to be, I'm saying you appeal, but I did it for free because it had. I
was just going to say, I hear over and over again that women can't afford an appeal. I mean, so many of the ramifications of this family court crisis, because I truly believe it is, regular people and taxpayers who think they're immune from this, right, Meg? Like we said, you think, oh, I'm happily married, I'm never in family court. Do you know the havoc that these cases, wreak on families and everyone who needs services, and the mental health crises after, women or men going bankrupt, and needing assistance? I mean, the system is broken and we're all paying for it, whether you think you are or not. Right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I know. I remember having a client who was very a wealthy marriage. She was a stay-at-home mother, and she had like 5 children. And he suddenly left her for another woman, just left her, no money, no nothing. And there was a certain process there was no kind of emergency process for getting support. You had to file and do it in the normal way. There was nothing. And I suggested that she would just go to, have to get welfare in between while we would do this. I mean, I was petitioning and doing all this stuff, but there's still this period of time. And she was like, "Oh no, welfare is for like frauds, women who are just taking advantage." And I was like, "No, now you have a chance to see that
Yes.
welfare is for women and children, mostly, people who don't have money and need it to survive. That's what it's for. And the other thing is a myth. It's a myth.
Right. And I
Um,
mean, look at what's going on in our country today on a larger scale, right? People have this lack of empathy and think that people in need are freeloaders when
right.
they could be, one job loss away or a divorce away from being in this type of situation. I say that all the time. I live in an affluent area, Fairfield County, Connecticut, and I've seen women go from living in multi-million-dollar homes to literally homeless in some of situations like the one you're describing. I'm wondering, Meg, what do you think is the biggest myth regular people believe about family court?
Um, Well, I think they think that it's a system that is, working to make the families, in the best situation. I think they believe that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, that
Mm.
you go to family court and it resolves, certain things. And that's not what happens. It's if
Hmm.
you can get out. I mean, I used to do a training for clients at Legal Aid, and one of the things about custody, and I would say, you do not want to get into the system if you can help it. A
Right,
lot of them
right.
think, well, I need an order. It's like, no, you don't need an order unless you need an order.
Right, right, right.
Otherwise, stay out of family court if you possibly can. But there's so many myths in general about, that if it would, well, if it was really bad, so bad, she would have left a long time ago, wouldn't have gotten to that. So I don't really think that it could be that bad. He can be a good father, even if he's not a good partner.
Hmm.
She provokes him, and domestic violence is a private matter. It's not a social matter. We shouldn't really be getting involved in those kind of
Right,
things. And women are just as abusive as men, which I mean, in
right.
terms of that,
And
that
this
it's
belief
not
that it takes two to tango, right? There's two sides
right.
to every story and all that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
What
Yeah. Somebody
advice?
just said
Yeah.
that to me the other day. It's like, well, no matter how thin the pancake is, there's two sides to it. And I was like, well, one side, the problem is that one side is a liar.
Yeah, exactly. One side of the pancake is a liar. Exactly. And can be very great at pretending they are not a liar in court, right?
Absolutely. Yes. Oh, absolutely. That's the other thing. I mean, in terms of getting, the women going into court need so much advice about it because of all the myths. They have to come in looking a certain way, acting a certain way, because the guys all do that naturally because they're all,
Mm-hmm.
you know, uh,
Well, that's what
smart
I do.
enough.
My heart has led me to this work coaching women because I didn't have a custody battle, but I've been married and divorced twice and had two post divorce litigations going on at the same time.
Yeah.
With each ex husband, I learned a lot. And, I want to teach women what I didn't know, right? And all the mistakes that I made, I don't want them to make. I'm wondering, Meg, what would you tell a woman who is just beginning a custody battle?
Well, it really does depend on the circumstance. I mean, I just was asked, I just got an email this morning from somebody talking about worried about their sister who, I mean, this is, it's a specific case, but the husband is actually just got diagnosed with some serious form of cancer, but he has demanded that she leave. And so she's packing. She has two kids and she's packing to leave because he demanded it just on the phone. And I was like, no, there's so many things happening. I mean, first
Yeah.
of all, she could be blamed for deserting her husband when he's ill.
Yeah. Right.
There's nothing on record that says that he said that she should leave with the children.
Hmm.
Um, I was thinking, gee, maybe he'll die. That would be good. So don't do anything about divorce now. Do not file.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, there's just so many things that women don't,
Right.
individually to the case. So it's really hard to say, don't do this or don't do that. But one thing is to definitely, because women are seen as, potentially the one who's doing the abusing or who's like pushing his buttons or whatever, it's very important never to be caught on tape or caught in writing,
Yes.
acting anything other than, a sweet person who's being abused. It's
Right. And
perfectly
someone who is, I always tell clients, facilitating that relationship if it's safe with the other parent, right? Because they can
yeah.
take one comment and twist that around in court, right? That you kept
Mhm.
me from my kids just
Right.
because you couldn't, you know, accommodate their Saturday night last minute demand when Bobby had a birthday party with his friends.
Mhm.
It was like, no, you can't, not this Saturday,
Right.
but how about another day, right? Like you always have to look
Right.
like you're facilitating that relationship.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And you also need to sort of yourself be documenting what's happening in this
Right.
quiet, non accusatory way. Just say, well, when you hit Josie, she was very upset about it. And so let's give her a few days recovery. And please don't do that. I've asked you so many times, don't hit. We don't need to hit our children.
Right. Right.
And he can say whatever, but if you say it very sincerely, you should always be making your case quietly.
Right. And the way you
Mhm.
phrase that, Meg, because you're the expert, you're putting the best interest of the child first, which the court is supposed to do, right? But that
Right.
standard is fraught with problems, right?
Yeah. I had a judge who actually, I always won in front of him and everything, but I had this case. He had a favorite saying, which was a true belief of his, which he said all the time: the children are resilient. So he was not concerned about, okay, so they're always eating junk food with the father. They don't go to bed at night. They're watching inappropriate things. Well, children are resilient. He always had that. So you really had to have abuse. You had to
You're
have
right.
physical abuse or threats of violence before he would think that it was anything that he cared about. I don't know what kind of a father he was, but
Well, it's
anyway.
amazing. I think one of the things that blew my mind when I really learned about the family court system is how much incredible discretion judges have and very few
Absolutely.
checks on their power. They have
Right.
immunity, right?
And that is not true in any other court, any other part of the court. In criminal
Right.
court, there's very clear rules. Everybody appeals all the time. Everybody follows the rules. It's
Mhm.
accepted that you're going to appeal, that the defendant will
Right.
appeal. In family court, it's almost unheard of for there to be appeals. But the thing that I did with this lawyer, this judge who believed that, is that this one time, I just decided all the things that the man did were just so devious. But he didn't hit, but he was so devious,
Mm.
and so I right right now there's somebody calling me back who's an abuse
I
victim,
know
and I
you are in
asked to
demand,
call.
Meg. We know
I
you
had
are in demand.
asked family and friends not to call me, but um, anyway, what I did was I prepared this closing statement in which I said, and there was people in the courtroom who were just aghast when I said it because everybody knew what kind of this myth that he had. I started out by saying we like to believe that children are resistant, but children are not as resistant as we like to believe. I said that all of our
Resilient, you mean, right? Resilient. Yeah, yeah.
resilient, yeah. I said children are not as resilient as we like to believe. That our mental hospitals, our jails, our rehabs are filled to overflowing with people who were not resilient enough as children.
Right,
So we have
right.
to, and so and everybody was like, oh, and he sort of gave me a little glare initially,
Then you
because
won him over.
he knew I was, but at the end, when he gave his decision in my favor, in my client's favor, he said, yeah, Miss Groff is right that children are resilient, but not that resilient. So he moved, and he never said that again. Never
Right.
said that expression again. That was so so common to him. So I think you do need to, I'm just mentioning again that you need to confront, but there are all these ideas that judges have. And
Mhm.
the main thing you have to try and do is to get rid of them. And it's hard because you have evaluators, you have,
Yep.
have guardian ad litems, all with the same kinds of attitudes. And I just, so it's a fight. And for
Right, right.
women
I
who
think
are
the question is,
underrepresented.
they need to be educated on the nuances of coercive control and domestic abuse, but do they want to be? Do they?
Well, I think you can get people to be educated even when they don't want to be. I think
Okay.
there are ways to do that. There's ways to point it out. There's ways, and also ways to point out that um, in the absence of understanding it and placing a child at risk, there is some risk to the person who's done that. The
Oh,
judge,
yeah.
I mean, Caden was from Bucks County.
Right, right.
It was our case. And that judge, he was in the news for a very long time. He's still in
Yeah.
the news.
Yes, yes.
He was
I've
moved.
seen the articles.
Yeah, he was moved out of family court. I do not believe he will be reelected, So you have to also put that sort of fear into them,
Absolutely. We've seen that play out with other cases across the country. Well, I hope everyone gets your book, your memoir. There's so much in there, Meg. It is just excellent. I mean, anyone who cares about other people, anyone who's in a divorce, who works in this field, it's just a must read. But I want to move on to this segment I have on Girl Wake Up called Truth or Trap, where I'm going to throw out a statement that's a common assumption. And you are going to tell me whether it's truth or a trap. So this is something we hear all the time, those of us in the divorce world, right? In family court, whoever has the most money wins. What do you think about that, Meg, in all your years and experience in the family court system?
I'm unfortunately going to say that I think that is largely true. I think that's largely true.
Sadly, right? Like sadly.
Yeah, sadly, yes. I was expecting that you were going to give some myth, and I was going to say, okay, now that's one of the things I'm enraged about. But in this case, I mean, it sadly is true. You can afford a better lawyer. You can just come across. You can constantly be litigating. You can just drain the other person. Judges do. People respect people who are rich. We can see that in our politics. Somehow being rich, it gives you some kind of gloss that you do not necessarily deserve. Has nothing, So I think that unfortunately there's a lot of truth to that. I think that's probably true all the way through the court system. In criminal court, we know that people that don't have money are really screwed. So
Right. And I think that, the lesson for all women, and that's why I started my podcast, Girl Wake Up, because I believe the systems are not going to look out for us. We have to look out for each other and ourselves, is that, don't give up your financial independence. Have your own. I'm not saying you're going to have millions stocked away for a possible legal battle, but it is important that you have your own income and you're thinking about that, because I coach so many women who, some of them have multiple Ivy League degrees or successful careers, who give it up to stay home. And then it's like the guy you mentioned, he finds another woman and walks out, and she's stuck, and she's called a gold digger in court.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And if she gets alimony is very difficult to get, depending.
Yes.
And I absolutely give that same advice. There's no question that you need to have separate resources, and you need to have I always think that you need to have everything put together in some kind of place in case anything happens, especially if there's any indication that the person you're with is controlling in any kind of way.
Absolutely.
You need to have an escape bag that has everything that you might, you need to make copies of things along the way and give them to somebody. You need to know what's happening in your life, and you need to also be able to the best that you can, be able to sustain your life without that person. But in this particular case, you can give her my number
okay.
to try and answer it specifically. It's that's a reality. It's very hard for a person who doesn't have a lawyer because you can't do the thing about being irate, and you can't do the thing about making them afraid of you. Can't do any of those things.
Right. I mean, some people, Meg, right, have successfully been pro se, but that's a lot. I mean, it's a huge, it's a full-time job practically. It is, it takes a special person.
You should look for witnesses. If you have witnesses, people who make a good impression, if you can bring a lot of witnesses with you, people who've seen you as a parent and seen the other parent as a parent, that kind of thing, to try and get other people talking about you and what they've seen. Judge might not think that you're emotional, but maybe sociologists that from the university who takes the time to come in to say that he has seen you parenting And he knows what an unbelievably good parent you are, and that you have dealt with these situations in ways that he would have been emotional, but you were not, or something,
Right.
Your reactions are very normal and expected.
Right. It's like that third party validation, right?
Yeah. I'd say that if you have nothing else, you try and amass as many people as you can to come help you. And when you want to do that, by the way, you shouldn't start out by saying, "Would you be my witness?" You start out by talking about your circumstance. And if they say something that says like, "Gee, I know you're such a good parent," that's when you say, "Gee, would you be willing?"
Right,
Don't start out with it because people are afraid.
Thank you so much, Meg. Is there any parting thoughts you want to share? Or I want people to know how they can find you also.
I mean, I don't want people to lose heart because, the fight can be won and it needs to be fought. And I would like people to read my book. I wrote the book to try and educate people about what family court is about. When I was doing the work, if ever I tell somebody about a case, they say, "Oh, I can't believe that." And I thought, someday I'm going to write about these stories, and so that people will understand, and also try and give some tips to lawyers.
Well, you may be in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, but you have made ripple effects across the country and around the world with your book and your work. I can't thank you enough as someone in this field advocating in a tiny way. Thank you for all you have done and for being here today. Thanks for listening to Girl Wake Up. I'm your host, Amy Polacco. If this episode woke something up in you, don't let it fade. Share it with a friend who needs to hear it, leave a review, and keep this conversation going. Remember, no one's coming to save you, so she did.